Here, what we're going to be looking at is the expenses that the employer will pay for you being an employer or employee for them. They're called employers' payroll expenses, and this is section 3, so chapter 9, section 3. All right, you can find these notes towards the back of the packet that I gave you guys in class, and we're going to look at all the different things that employers will do. First of all, they're called fringe benefits, and fringe benefits can be pension funds or retirement types savings. They can be your paid vacations, they can be sick leave or health insurance, basically any money that is a benefit to you that the employer is paying. And obviously, there's a lot of different funds and things that can be purchased for you. I can think of another example is a TSA, and a TSA is called a tax sheltered annuity. And your employer also might put money away, and that's just an investment for you. That's an investment. All right, FICA employer tax. FICA stands for Federal Insurance Contribution Act. Federal Insurance Contribution Act. And what that is, employers are required to match. They're required to match the FICA tax from each employee. So every employee will be, they have to contribute to the FICA, and each employer then will match the same amount. So if you put 50 bucks in every week for FICA, your employer has to also put in 50 bucks. Okay, so with that being said, FICA also is it's a contribution that is going to be Social Security and also Medicaid and Medicare. So first of all, let's talk about Social Security. Social Security normally has a 6.2%. This is how much, as an employee, you pay. So if you pay 6.2%, your employer has to pay that same amount. Medicare. Medicare is 1.45%. And we worked with these percentages in our other section. So if you pay 1.45%, your employer also has to match that. Okay, so what we know about FICA employer tax, it's Social Security plus Medicare. That would be the total contribution. Now, self-employment contribution tax, if you are yourself employed, you have to also pay employer and employee. So you would have to take the 6.2% for Social Security and double it. That would equal 12.4%. You have to pay for yourself and being the employer. And you have 1.45% for Medicaid or Medicare, and double that, and that is going to be 2.9%. So these are the percentages that you would use if you are trying to figure out your FICA or your contribution if you are self-employed. All right, some other types of contributions that we have that as an employer would be state unemployment tax. So unemployment does mean it's compensation. Compensation to workers that have lost their job. Now there's two types of state unemployment tax, or two types of unemployment tax. One of them is state, and the other one is federal. So state unemployment tax is SUTA, and federal unemployment tax is FUTA. And that is a tax that is paid by employers for each employee to provide unemployment compensation to workers who have lost their jobs. All right, there's a certain percentage that we would use here. So for SUTA, the employer has to pay 5.4%, and for FUTA or federal, it's 0.8%. Sometimes if you have great employment, then you can have tax breaks, and those records can, having great records can lower your rate that you would have to pay. All right, that's just on an individual basis. Okay, the last couple things we're going to do here before we look at some examples is talk about how to find the fringe benefit percent. As in all percents, it's total divided by gross payroll. So it's going to be the total fringe benefit divided by gross payroll. And the quarterly estimated tax for a self-employed person would be, you'd have to take your Social Security plus the Medicaid or Medicare plus your income tax and you have to divide that by 4. So quarterly right here means 4 times a year. That's every 3 months. And so this would be how much you would have to pay each quarter. So every 3 months, if you are self-employed, you have to pay your taxes. All right, let's go ahead now and look at our first example. This is example 13. All right, example 13 says Spectrum Engineering has 25 employees, each with gross earnings of $250 per week. What are the total FICA taxes that should be withheld from each employee's weekly paycheck? So we got 2 things we have to figure. We're going to figure Social Security. I'm just going to abbreviate that SS. That's going to be $250. That's your weekly payment times your rate. So rate is going to be 6.2%. You do want to use the decimal form for that percent. And that gives you $15.50. And then we're going to do the medical. Medical, I'm just going to abbreviate with an M. So you have your amount that you're paid, the $250, that's your wage. And then the percent is 1.45, so 0.0145%. And again, as a decimal, so when you multiply that out, you get $3.63. All right, so the total here, when you put those together, $19.13 each week. So $250, $19.13 is going for FICA taxes. All right, that would be for each employer, okay, each employee. Now, at the end of the first quarter, there were, what were the accumulated totals of the employees' share and the matching taxes for FICA and the Spectrum had sent to the IRS. All right, well, if you had $19.13 for each employee, if you take that times 25, this is going to be for all of them, and that's $478.25. Okay, again, this is weekly. All right, now, if I'm looking at quarterly, okay, in the first quarter, there's always 13 weeks each quarter, okay? So I need to take that times 13, okay, and that's going to give you quarterly. All right, so $478.25, that's all 25 employees, times 13 weeks. Now that is $6,217.25. Okay, this is coming from the employee. The employer has to match it. Okay, so employee plus employer, they're both $6,217.25, so we just have to double it. The total contribution would be $12,000 $434.50. That's how much has to be paid by the employer. Their contribution was half. Okay? All right, so that's how you figure out, and you can deal with the first quarter. All right, looking now on to example number 14. What are the Social Security and Medicare taxes of a self-employed landscaper? Self-employed landscaper with a net earnings of $43,800 per year. So this landscaper has to pay taxes for himself and being the employee and employer at the same time. So what we need to do is you're going to take the $43,800. This is going to be for Social Security, and that rate is going to be times 12.4%, so 0.124. And I multiply that together and I get $5,431.20. That's for Social Security. Now for medical, you take your $43,800, which is again for the whole year, times the percent, which would be 2.9%, so 0.029, and multiply that and you get $1,270.20. All right, that's how much is being contributed for this tax. If you want to total that up, then our total is $6,701.40. That again it's because of the self-employment that we have to double our rate for Social Security and also for Medicaid. All right, example 15. Uniphase Industries Incorporated had a total payroll of $50,000 last month. Uniphase pays a SUTA tax rate of 5.4% and a FUTA, that's federal, rate at 6.2% less the SUTA credit. If none of the employees had reached the $7,000 wage base, so a lot of times there's a wage base here, and that wage base will be what controls that contribution. What is the amount of the SUTA and the FUTA tax company must pay? All right, well, we established earlier that for SUTA, this is the state, you're going to take your payroll of $50,000 and multiply it by the rate of 5.4%, so 0.054, and that gives us $2,700. Now the way the FUTA works is it's the less tax rate. So it's the difference between the 6.2% and the 5.4%. And earlier, if I subtract the 6.2% minus 5.4, then that's when I get the 0.8%. Okay, that's where we got the 0.8 earlier. So you take $50,000 times 0.08, and the federal then gives us $400. All right, this all goes to unemployment tax. That's both state and federal amounts that are being contributed for this employer. Example 16. In addition to its payroll, or a gross payroll of $150,000 per month, Premier Distributors Incorporated with 75 employers pays 7% of payroll to a retirement fund, 9% for health insurance, and $25 per employee for a stock purchase plan. So that's again, those are those fringe benefits. All right, so for this first example here, it says, what are the company's monthly fringe benefit expenses? Well, we've got a total of payroll here. That's all of the 75 employees, 150,000, and we got 7% for retirement. If I find 7% of 150,000, I get 10,500. All right, that is for your retirement fund, and 9% for health insurance. So I'm going to go 150,000 times 9%. That amount is 13,500. And finally, we've got the $25 per employee. 25 times 75 employers, and that is 1,875. Okay, so these are the individual parts, it's the grand total for that would be $25,875. All right, here's the second part. What percent of payroll does this represent? Well, you take the fringe benefits, which is what we just found, you divide it by the total of the gross payroll of $150,000, and this is going to give us a rate, which is 17.25%. Now do divide, but then of course you always have to adjust your decimal so you can write it as a percent. All right, here is our last example before I give you a chance to try them on your own. Ben Qualls is a self-employed marketing consultant. His estimated annual earnings is $110,000. His Social Security tax rate is 12.4 up to the wage base. We're going to use the wage base that we did earlier in this chapter when we were in class. Medicare is 2.9%, and his estimated federal income tax rate is 18%. How much estimated tax must he send to the IRS each quarter? Quarter is going to be, again, after 3 months or 13 weeks. Okay? All right, so here's what we have. We are going to find Social Security first. Social Security, you're only taxed up to $106,800. So we're going to do $106,800. That's that base amount times the 12.4% as a decimal. This gives us $13,243.20. Remember, you're not taxed for the amount over, okay? But for Medicare, there is not a minimum amount. So for Medicare, we're going to take the $110,000 and multiply it by the 2.9% as a decimal, and this gives us $3,190. And finally, we got 18% for income tax. Income tax. 110,000 is the amount times your 18%. This gives us $19,800. All right, so this is quite a bit of money here that's being contributed. We need to have a total, the total amount of tax being paid. So if I add all these together, I should get $36,233.20. This is not what I'm asked to find, though. I am asked to find how much does he pay each quarter. Okay, this was based on a year. So this is for the whole year. If I want quarter, I'm going to divide it by 4. When you divide that by 4, you get $9,058.30. All right, so this concludes our what does the employer pay for tax and how does it match the employee's contributions based on fringe benefits and the unemployment tax and all of the things that will go into those taxes. What I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and do the try it problems on the back page, and if you pause the video and you work through these examples, what you can do then is check your results when you're done. Here are your results for your try it problems. I know that this first one, part A, had a lot of extra work with it, so the final answer you can see here is at the top. Part B, a little bit less, but those are your 2 answers for both Social Security and Medicare. Part C, you had to find both SUTA and FUTA tax. Part D here, you have 3 different answers. And finally, E, final answer, $10,180.80. All right, this concludes then our information here from section 3 in chapter 9. You are now ready to do your practice problems and your Cengage assignment.